Hey, welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker is Sebastian Vieira. He is a naturalist and engineer who grew up surrounded by orchids and began exploring the mountains of Colombia with his father and friends. He has discovered and described a number of new orchid species, and in 2016, along with a group of conservation-minded people, established Corporación SalvaMontes, which is a nonprofit NGO dedicated to the conservation of nature and biodiversity. Currently, SalvaMontes protects 1,300 acres of cloud forests in a highly biodiverse hotspot in the northern tropical Andes, where several locally endemic and threatened orchids are protected. Sebastian today will tell us a little bit about the recent goings-on with Corporación SalvaMontes and their reserves.
Okay, it's a pleasure to meet a lot of you again, and also those who weren't here last year. Thank you so much for the invitation. We are really thrilled to be able to share our project here. Thank you so much. So I will talk a bit about conservation of mostly neuroendemic and threatened orchids in the north of the Central Andes in Colombia. As some of you might know, in Colombia, the Andes split into 3 different cordilleras, and we are working on the central one. So as the agenda, I will first share a little about what is the problem and the solution that we are developing, the current status of things for the conservation of nature and orchids in our country. Then I will share a bit about our conservation initiative and then tell you of some ways of how to become a part of it or support us. So, well, as Ron introduced me, I present myself as a naturalist photographer. I was a founding member of SalvaMontes, an NGO for the conservation of nature that was started in early 2016. We have been working with this now for a little bit more than 7 years, and currently I am the executive director of this ONG. And then talking about orchids, well, I am also mostly focused on orchid conservation and taxonomy. I am part of some of the research groups in Colombia, and also with the IUCN, I collaborate in the Orchid Specialist Group and the Colombian Plant Specialist Group. So, about the problem, we are located here in Colombia. The orange area you see here is the Antioquia department, which is in the north of Colombia. Is where the extreme of the western and central Andes are located. And unfortunately, Antioquia is also the first department in Colombia with the highest deforestation rate. So from 2002 and 2022, 128,000 hectares of forest has been lost. So this is really a big problem in this country and in this department. And we think that the best solution to fight this problem is to protect the habitats that still remain in the area, and also to help restore some of the habitats that were lost. So the current status of this in the world is let's say that there has been a way to identify the places where conservation is most important in the world, and is what we call the biodiversity hotspots. And the biodiversity hotspots are like tiny places of the world that hold most of the biodiversity. So there is much more richness of species in these areas. And particularly in South America, there is an important hotspot that is the tropical Andes that goes from the south in Chile and to the north in Colombia, where we are located right now. It has a very high diversity of habitats because the Andes go from sea level up to more than 6,000 meters in elevation. So in a very small area, you get a lot of diversity of different habitats for nature, and that is why there is a total of more than 35,000 species in general in this hotspot, and almost 50% of the species in this area are also endemic. No, they are not present anywhere else in the world. And then if we focus in Colombia, you can say that Colombia is also, together with Ecuador, one of the richest countries. If we talk about plants, for example, we have more than 35,000 species, and only in orchids we have more than 4,000 species of orchids. And also very important is that 37% of these species are endemic to Colombia. So there's a high diversity, but also those species cannot be found anywhere else in the world. And if we analyze this richness of species in Colombia in the different areas of the country, we can also see that the Andes is the area that holds most of those species. It's probably 77% of the species of flora in Colombia are present in the Andes. And if we talk about orchids, we have 2,500 species of orchids only in the Andes. So species are concentrated in a very small area of the country. And particularly the Antioquia department is also the most species-rich, if we talk about orchids, department in Colombia, with 1,300 species. 41% of the orchid species of the country are present in Antioquia, and 40% of those species are endemics. But if we couple this with also that Antioquia is the department with the highest rate of deforestation, we see that this is a big threat to the orchid richness and diversity in the Andes and in the Colombian area. So this is the Antioquia department that you see the area to the right, and the small green area is where we are located right now, our project. This is a very special area because it's at the end of the northern Andes, the central Andes, but it also shares a lot of species with the western Andes. So it's a spot where we can see many species from both the central and the western Andes. It's a really particular area that in fact was acknowledged by the local government, Antioquia, and they declared it as an integrated management regional district, which is one of the protected area categories recognized by the Colombian government. It doesn't offer a lot of protection, but at least it puts this area in the map of protected areas of the country. But also, by applying the key biodiversity areas, the criteria for key biodiversity areas that were developed by the IUCN, we can see that this area can qualify as a key biodiversity area. So we have been working with the Colombian Plant Specialist Group and the Instituto Humboldt of Colombia, and we already made a proposal that was submitted 2 months ago to the IUCN, and we expect that this same area, the Alto Ventanas, will be declared as an official key biodiversity area during the course of the next year. So about this area, the Alto Ventanas, it is really special because it collects like all the humid air that comes from the lowlands in the north, and when they meet the cold air from the mountains, there is a lot of clouds and precipitation. So we have more than 4,000 millimeters a year of rain, which is very similar to the Chocó and Pacific region. We have elevations that go from 900 to 2,400 meters. And the area of the protected area that the government recognized is more than 23,000 hectares. We have so far registered more than 190 orchid species, but we estimate that there might be more than 300 species. During the last 7 years, we have been able to discover and publish 10 new orchid species. And we know that there is a high local orchid endemic. If we talk only about Lepantes, which is one of the genuses which has a lot of species in this area, there is more than 12% of the species of Lepantes in Colombia are present in this area, and more than 6% of these species are local endemics. You cannot find it anywhere else. Okay, and also talking about other groups of living things, we also have in this area some critically endangered and local endemics like the magnolia that you see on the top left, also the Dracula lemorella, and this is a poison flower that is from the Andes but has been spotted only in 2 places in Colombia. And this is the handless slender opossum, which is a small mammal that is also a local endemic of this Alto de Ventanas region. We also have several endemic orchid species that cannot be found anywhere else outside of the Alto Ventanas, like this Chlorotalis orthostachys, Pseudolepanthes vitleniensis, which is named after one of the municipalities in this area, this Telipogon, Chlorotalis grayana, and Lepanthes deficiens. As I mentioned before, this is a Lepanthes hotspot. Here you can see some of the species that we can find in this area. But there is also a high diversity of Stanopeina orchids. We have been surprised that after exploring this area for more than 7 years, every time that we go there, we find new things. And for example, this Sibekingia colombiana, we only saw it for the first time in this area like 3 months ago. But we also have Sibekingia filifera, which is a real rarity. It has been only found, we have found only 2 plants of this species in the last 7 years. And there are no records of this species outside the Altos de Ventanas. We also have Stanhopea, like Platyceras, Polycygnus grandiflora, which was a big surprise because it was thought that to occur only in Costa Rica, but we found it in the reserve. Polycygnus muscifera, which is a more widespread species, and Auletia loviana, which is very present in one of the reserves near the waterfalls. It really likes to grow only in rocks besides water streams. So our orchid conservation initiative, it's focusing mostly on the conservation of nature through the habitat conservation, natural reserves. And we are, SalvaMontes, since 1 month ago, is present both in the tropical Andes and also in the Chocó, because we were able to create a new natural reserve like 1 month ago in the Darien Gap. With the help of the International Palm Society, we acquired 50 hectares and created a new nature reserve for a palm that is endemic to that region, the Sabinaria magnifica palm. So here is in the Alto Ventanas, it's like a map of what we are protecting currently in the green areas. We started with the La Selva de Ventanas Reserve, which is on the left top. Then, with the help of the Orchid Conservation Alliance, we bought the parcel for the Reserva Natural La Esperanza, which is 50 hectares. And during the last year, we have been creating and expanding Los Magnolios. And we are thrilled also to announce that Los Magnolios grew during this last week. The last Tuesday, we signed the documents and acquired a big parcel in this map of Los Magnolios is the big chunk that you can see to the low of the reserve. It is 246 hectares of pristine forests, untouched forests, and it's really surprising because during a visit 1 week ago, we were opening a trail for the first time in this forest, and during a 2-hour visit in this trail, we were able already to discover a new species of Lepantes. So in these reserves, we are protecting endangered orchid species like Pharmipedium gene, which is red listed by the IUCN as an endangered species. Lepantes golondrina, which is also an endangered species that has been detected only in this part of the central Andes and in the Choco region, both in Colombia and very recently by Marco Monteros from Ecominga. They were able to find it also in Ecuador. And Dracula lemurela, which is critically endangered and is a Dracula whose only natural population exists inside the Los Magnolios Nature Reserve. As far as we know, there are no living plants in nature anywhere else. So this is why we have been working a lot on protecting this species, trying to understand its population dynamics. And we were able to characterize more than 300 plants of these species inside the reserve in 6 different trees. And currently with an undergraduate student from University of Antioquia, we are starting to do some symbiotic germination trials right there in the forest. And also, as the type locality of this species is inside one of the nature reserves that we have, the La Selva de Ventanas. But in that area, this orchid is not present anymore. We are starting to do some reintroduction trials by taking some pieces of the plants from Los Magnolios Reserve and trying to plant them in the type locality and see what happens. We also have been documenting the species this way with the Lancaster digital composite plates in order to have a better understanding and a good documentation of the species that we have in the reserves. And we were able, with the Orchid Conservation Alliance, to name some of the new species with their names adopted by some people who were donated to protect their habitat. Like in this case, Robert Pemberton, who adopted these two Lepante species and were dedicated to him and his wife. Lepantes Glory, which was named in honor to the late mother of a dearest friend that is also part of SalvaMontes, and the Elizabeth Wakeman Henderson Charitable Foundation was also donated to buy this new parcel of the property that I showed you before, and this we named this species after the memory of Elizabeth Betty Wakeman. And this is coming soon. This is the last species that we have discovered in the area, and it was discovered by our forest ranger while he was doing some of his patrols. After he started working for SalvaMontes, he became really interested in orchids and started to send me photos of the orchids that he found in the forest, and this is how he was able to discover this new species. He's really proud to have been the discoverer of a new orchid species, and we expect this to be published in 1 or 2 months. We also have in our reserves, as I mentioned before, the Marmosops hanley, which is critically endangered, together with the magnolia tree. And we have also been studying a lot of the frogs and amphibians in the area. And we have these birds, the Banksia melanoclamis, which was thought to exist only in the western Andes of Colombia before, but is now present it now has been also seen in the Los Magnolias Reserve. So we know that it is there also, and it's also one of the objects of conservation that are valuable for our reserve. We have been working with the community members. This is a couple of campesinos which live nearby. They have their house near the reserve, and we hire them as to be forest rangers and work in the tree greenhouse. So they have been propagating trees for us now for a little bit more than 2 years, and they have learned a lot and got very interested. He is the man who discovered the new orchid, and after starting working for us, she got really interested in birds and is now establishing a bird observatorium in her house with a very good success. And she's really happy to be working with nature right now, because before working for SalvaMontes, what they were doing was logging the forest to produce charcoal and sell it. So their mindset and their perception of nature has really changed a lot after working for SalvaMontes. Now, I will show you how to be part of this, how you can support SalvaMontes, also be part of our conservation efforts. Currently, we are looking to expand the Los Magnolias Reserve through the purchase of another parcel, which is named La Mosca, the blue area that you can see on the top right here, which is almost 70 hectares. This area is important because it has a lot of untouched pristine forest in the area. It's also home to several threatened species, as you can see here in text. And it's also strategic for us because it has a very good area for the future development of visitor infrastructure. So for this purchase, we are looking to get $70,500 that we need to buy it. It has been already negotiated with the owners, and they are waiting for us to buy it. So how can you support it? Well, here you can see like a closer look of this area through a drone aerial image. You can see that it is mostly covered with forests, and there are also some areas that were pastures that can be restored. So these are some ways that you can use to donate to this project. You can adopt a name of an orchid and describe species. These are 3 of the undescribed species that we are offering right now. You can also get magnolia tree adoption certificates that are available through our website. And well, for now, this is all that I want to share with you, but I am open to other questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. That was really terrific. There's one question in the chat. I've got a couple of my own, but let's start with the question in the chat, and we'll go from there. The question in the chat is, what happened with the magnolia seedlings that were started in greenhouses?
Well, during the last 2 years, and with the support from the Fundación Franklin, we have been able to produce now more than 200 seedlings of magnolia, and some of them already reached the size to be planted in the habitat. So during the last 6 months, we were able to move 120 of these new trees back into their habitat inside the nature reserves.
That's fantastic.
That's wonderful.
Sarah asks, do you have any ecotourism plans for any of these areas?
Yes, in Los Magnolias Reserve, there is a house that we have adapted for tourism, and we are starting to get mostly student groups from local universities, but, well, for example, Peter Tobias here was visiting this once. Also, Edward was there. So yeah, we really want to start moving tourism into this area, and this is also a way to get people to know this project and support it. And
On
also,
oh, go ahead, please.
yeah, also we have plans to build a cabin near the road in Los Buñuelos Reserve. We were planning to have it ready this year, but there have been some problems with getting the legal permit in this area, mostly because of corruption of the local administration offices. But we expect to start building the cabin early next year and have it ready during 2024.
So following up on that a little bit, Elsie asks whether you plan to establish research centers associated with the reserves dedicated to maybe study of different plants and animals that are found in the area, and what kinds of collaborations you might be establishing with various local universities.
Yes, we are currently working with local universities in Medellin, the Universidad de Antioquia and El CES, and also EAFIT. EAFIT is another one. We have been having some groups visiting the reserves and studying different groups, and it has been really successful. During one of these visits, for example, the professor is an expert in damselflies, and he was able to find like 3 or 4 new species of damselflies in the reserve during a weekend. So there is a really high potential for finding new things in the reserve and for getting students to do their practices in the reserves too. But we also would like to start doing this with foreign universities. That's something that we are looking forward to in the future. So if anyone here is interested in helping in that way, we are really open and also very interested to start having groups from foreign universities or researchers visiting us.
And as a reminder, if you want to explore possible collaborations or make a contribution to one of the projects that is going on either with SalvaMontes or Ecomingo or other conservation partners, you can make those connections through the Orchid Conservation Alliance website. You can route donations through the OCA's website, and you can get more information about the projects that these various groups have going on. One thing I've noticed that I'm really, I think is really wonderful, Javier mentioned this and Sebastian, you mentioned this as well, is that even though the ultimate goal is, in terms of the OCA, is to support the conservation of orchids through conserving orchid habitat, all of these habitats also are rich in other plant groups, they're rich in animal groups. And I think the notion of, for example, having a reserve that starts with, that doesn't just include orchids from the very beginning, but also includes magnolias or palm trees, as you mentioned, can be a really useful way of protecting habitat using different kinds of flagship species.
There is a couple of other questions in the chat.
Yep. So how is current engagement from the local, this is from Paula Morales. How is current engagement from local people from Yarumal and the towns around the reserves? How is that going? And are you sharing your work with the local people?
Yeah, we have been working mostly with the local campesinos that we engage as rangers, or we also hire them when we need to plant trees or do other activities, but most important are the local schools. The local schools have been, we have been working with them during all these 7 years, and they are really engaged now and interested. The small kids and youngsters are really interested in visiting the reserves, helping with the activities. We have engaged them in some of the planting activities. We also have a couple of magnolia trees that are planted near their school, so they are the carers of these trees, and one of these trees is already starting to bloom. So they are really happy about that.
That's
And
great. Go ahead, please.
During the different projects that we start, like the Magnolia projects or the Dracula Lemarela projects, we always try to go to the schools and teach these kids about the species and their importance and how they can help to protect them.
Do you find that this is a message that is fairly common within the local communities, or is this something you have to work really hard to encourage?
And they are really receptive. It's mostly because previously they didn't know nothing about this, but once they learn about this, they start to be interested. They have even helped us to locate some magnolia trees in the forest, and some of these landowners started also to collect and propagate magnolias in their properties. So like they're really open and interested to collaborate once they learn that these things exist and that there are ways to help.
Wow, that's fantastic. Just a couple of comments. Ken Cameron mentions that thank you for emphasizing the value to conservation that can happen through naming new species to honor various people like friends or donors or scientists. This seems to have been a really useful strategy for you.
Yes, it has been really useful in our case. For example, this last property that we bought, which is one of the biggest chunks of forest that remain in this area, was bought partly through the adoption process of new names for orchids, and this has helped a lot. In the past, we also did this with 2 frog species that were discovered in the reserve, and this has been really useful for us. I think it's a very good way to allow people to help with the protection of biodiversity and have something in exchange for
it. You mentioned when you showed the map with the La Mosca property, which is a little less than 70 hectares, in relation to the existing Los Magnolios Reserve and so forth. I noticed, yeah, exactly that. I noticed that there are still a couple of open areas, the one just south of La Mosca and the one that's sort of surrounded by Los Magnolios. Can you say a little bit about those areas?
Yes, this is mostly because the areas which are closer to the villages of towns are more deforested. So that's why you can see, for example, in this map to the upper part, there is a very area of deforested that is because it is really close to one of the roads that goes to one of the populated areas. So it has been open for pastures for several years. And it also happens in La Mosca because that is the road that goes to Seden, one of the other communities nearby. So the current owners had some cows in this area, but they are no longer interested in continuing with the milk business. So they are trying to sell this property.
Is there is there a single landowner for the property just south of La Mosca?
Yes, this small piece that is between the two in the middle part of the map.
Yes.
Is only forest and is of a single property, single landowner, but the problem is that he doesn't have the legal titles for the property, so we cannot buy it.
Yeah, my understanding is that can often be a real obstacle.
Yes. In Colombia, the tenure of the property is really a problem in many places, and this also happens in this area that some people have lands that they have been using or occupying for several years, but they don't really have legal papers.
Interesting. Let's see. those are, I don't see any other questions, and those are most of the questions. I guess the only other question I had is, you mentioned at the beginning that the DRMI, the Integrated Management Regional District, doesn't have, it's designated, but it doesn't have very good protection. Can you maybe say a little bit more about what protection that kind of designation actually affords?
Yes, the RMI are like regional protected areas that are declared by the regional environmental authority, but it does not involve the government buying land. So the land still remains with their original owners, and the protected area designation the only thing that it does is to limit the use of the soil or the land in this area. But as this local authority also doesn't have the budget to patrol and enforce this, mostly people continue doing what they want to do, and in most cases this designation is not very protective.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And maybe related to that, when you set up Los Magnolios, when you have reserves, do you have any do you encounter any problems with people encroaching on the Los Magnolios properties or other properties? And if so, how are you managing that?
Well, we have the advantage in this area that we have a good relationship, and we also know all the neighbors. And fortunately, they are very respectful of the land limits, and they never engage or do anything illegal inside the natural reserves. So fortunately, we never had any problem, only with one of the neighbors that as we have on the limit with his property, we have some former pastures, and as the grass grows a lot, some of the cows sometimes come to eat the grass, but that has been only the only single problem that we had. So it's easy to solve. It's only to fix some of the fences and the problem is gone. So we really never had any real problem with neighbors.
That's really good news. Sort of connected to that, Mary asks, do you have any problems with mining concessions in these areas?
Well, not inside our reserves, but inside the DRMI. We learned during the last 6 months that there is a mining company looking for a concession in an area nearby to the La Esperanza Reserve. And it's also an area where there are several of the Magnolia polypsophylla trees, adult trees. So we are really worried about that. And we are also looking for a way to protect a particular parcel that is in that area, which holds like 15 adult trees of this magnolia. 15 is a lot if we consider that only 67 trees are known of this species of tree. So we are looking for a way to protect that, and Fundación Franklinia, which protects endangered trees, is interested in helping us with that.
Again, is that a single landowner situation, or is it more complicated?
Well, the mining concession area is bigger, but there is a special property there that belongs to a single landowner that we are focusing because it has a lot of these magnolia trees in this property. So we are trying to also buy that and protect it.
Is that adjacent to the existing property?
Not really. We see here we have like in this map here. We have a projected corridor here. It's inside this corridor, but it's not adjacent. It's close to La Esperanza, but it's not adjacent.
Got it. Okay.
But it's part of this corridor that we want to create in the future, not only through buying properties, but also through involving some of the landowners who also want to protect. For example, here in Los Magnolias, you see that there is like a big hole in the middle, but this is one of the neighbors who is also interested in protecting the forest. So we are not interested in buying his land, but what we do is to teach him how to protect and help him do it. So this is a different way to consolidate the corridor.
In Colombia, is there a legal designation for conservation at the federal level or at the regional level?
Yes, there is another protected area category that is called Civil Society Nature Reserve. So
Right.
you can follow a procedure and register your private property as a natural reserve with the government, and that gives you protected area protection with the government.
Yeah, I was going to say I think what you're alluding to, and we've seen this in other countries, is sometimes it's enough if you've got someone who wants to protect their land or wants to at least designate it that way to help them pay for the legal costs of the registration, and sometimes that's good enough.
Yes, it is not an easy process, but it can be done. We are looking forward to register all of our nature reserves because it also gives protection against mining concessions and infrastructure projects. So we are looking forward to do that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And I could imagine that that's another opportunity for fundraising to support the cost of getting those designations.
Yes, well, fortunately in Colombia is not very expensive, but yes, it needs some work to be done. And if you don't have a lot of knowledge about the area, it also requires a lot of biological research, and because you have to know what species do you have and things like that. But we have also been able to advance a lot in that way in our research.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sebastian. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but we greatly appreciate your presentation. Again, if you're interested in learning more or interested in contributing to any of the SalvaMontes projects, you can find information about how to do that through the OCA website. And with that, I think we'll take another break. This is our last formal break, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes with our final presenter. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for allowing us to show us our work here and share with you.